Hi, this is Scott Garibay. And lower your lightsabers, because today we're going to talk about the comet-like fall of one of the greatest franchises and intellectual properties of all time, the fall of Star Wars. Let's talk about it. Alright, so the reason we're talking about the fall of Star Wars today is because it was announced today that Catherine Powell, Disney Parks veteran, right? She's served for the Disney Parks for quite a few years. She's overseen the Galaxy's Edge, which is a huge, really important, very important aspect of the Star Wars of the Disney parks, right? So there is a Galaxy's Edge in Anaheim, California, and there's a Galaxy's Edge in Orlando, Florida. And frankly, right now, figuratively, they are ghost towns. There are people there, but they were expecting a tsunami of fans, and what they got was some pond-like ripples, right? They built an entire new transportation system in the parks to deal with the traffic, and frankly, that traffic never showed up, right? Star Wars fans just don't care about Galaxy's Edge, right? So now this follows the absolutely horrible catastrophe of Solo. Solo was a mess. It's the first Star Wars movie, I think, ever to not make $1 billion, right? In fact, most Star Wars movies make $2 billion or more, right? It's just like, and this one, it did nothing, all right? Solo just did nothing. It's the worst performing Star Wars movie in history, right? So today, let's talk about who's responsible. Why did this happen? What could have been done to avoid this? And what can we do to fix the problem going forward? All right, let's talk about who's responsible. Oh, I know, I hear you. You're like, oh, super simple. Who's responsible, Scott? It's Disney. No, right? All right. There are 3 parties involved in the death of Star Wars, and we really are seeing the death of Star Wars right now. I believe, it is gasping its last breaths, right? So who's responsible? First and foremost, the fans. Second, the creator, George Lucas. Third is Disney, all right? So let's talk it through. Why are the fans most responsible? The fans are most responsible because of their response to the prequel films. The prequel films were a gift to every single sci-fi fan out there, and we were horrible as a fan base. Now I'm a fan of the prequels, right? I always was, you can go back as far back on. I've been doing my videos coming up on like 6 years, and you can go back and you can find me talking wonderful things about the prequels all the way back, right? I've always been a fan of the prequels. I love them, right? But the reality is the fan base was absolutely horrendous to George Lucas. The prequels massively forwarded technology of movies overall, right? Like, you're watching special effects that were developed in the prequel movies right now, right? And the reality is the prequel movies really created a new generation of Star Wars fans, and we, the fans, just backhanded, figuratively, George Lucas for making those movies. We really treated him with incredible disrespect, contempt, and mocked him savagely. Mike Stocklasa, in my opinion, is the greatest culprit. He made Red Letter Media an entire channel built on prequel hate. I really, I got beef with that guy. I really do. And so first and foremost, by far, the people who are most responsible for the death of Star Wars are the fans and their incredibly disrespectful response to the prequel films. Second is the creator. George Lucas had an opportunity to act like a noble person and not be offended by the fans' horrendous response to the prequels. But he got so upset that he sold the entire Star Wars franchise to Disney for $4 billion. And we're going to talk about Disney in a minute, but if George Lucas had not done that, he was close enough to the property where he could have done some things to save it, right? And he didn't. He took the easy way out. He took the money, right? $4 billion sold Star Wars lock, stock, and barrel. Let's talk about Disney. All right. Disney came in. Here's what I think Disney did wrong. They attached people to Star Wars that did not love Star Wars. They liked it or they tolerated it, right? And they put those people in charge, and they gave them the steering wheel, right? Now, if you got a business to run, hey, I'm all for putting incredibly competent people who aren't super down with your franchise, but you need to make the critical decisions for the storytelling, for the for creating the images, creating the movies, creating the story, creating the characters, creating the narrative. You have got to put that in the hands of an absolute dyed-in-the-wool fan. Now, I think the perfect person is Pablo Hidalgo. I think he has the purest love for Star Wars that exists today, right? But the reality is, his hands are tied, and he has to do the bidding of the corporate masters. And the corporate masters just got too far. Disney's corporate masters got too in the woods. Now, what did they do to really screw things up? One, they put social goals in front of narrative, right? They put the social goals that they wanted to accomplish with the movies in front of the story itself. You can't do that. They also put people in charge with the real steering wheel, the real direction for Star Wars was given to people who tolerated it or liked it at best. The people who loved the property were shoved to the back. They were attached, they were there, but they were shoved to the back, and they were not allowed to make direction decisions, right? And then also the fan base was incredibly disrespected. Now, I don't think you have to kowtow to the fan base. Like, the fans need to be pushed back every now and then. You have to tell them no. You can't say yes to everything. I get that you need to make business decisions. But the reality is there were times where, the people connected to these Star Wars films just said absolutely horrendous things right to the core base. You can't do that. You just can't, right? And we know that now, right? You just can't, right? So the real culprits on the death of Star Wars is first and foremost the fans. The fans should have never been as disrespectful as they were to Lucas. The second was Lucas. He took the easy way out. He took the money. He didn't stay and protect the franchise. And last, absolutely last, is Disney, right? All right, now, by the way, every single one of those groups did things wrong to cause the death of Star Wars, but they all have aspects of love for Star Wars. We, the fans, love Star Wars. George Lucas loves Star Wars. There are people in Disney, Pablo Hidalgo, who love Star Wars, right? Like, it's there, but the reality is sometimes, we're all human beings, right? Sometimes, of course, Disney's not a human being, but human beings work at Disney. And the reality is the people we love, based on our proximity, often they're the people we hurt, right? And the reality is this is, Star Wars is the same situation, and you have to be respectful and kind, and we all failed. We're all responsible for this situation, right? It's tough, really tough, and I'm very sad to see this, right? But also, I don't want to pretend anymore, right? We're coming up on Star Wars 9, and I'm hoping it's going to be okay. And one of the things is, like, the fan base was so upset by Star Wars 8 that they have been talking about a boycott. And a lot of people laughed at the Star Wars boycott. Boy, I will tell you, Grace says it best. That boycott is fully operational, right? And Galaxy's Edge, there's Galaxy's Edge in Anaheim and in Orlando. They're virtual ghost towns, right? Like, they are not seeing the traffic that they were expecting. Now, okay, we talked about who's responsible. What happened, right? Well, one, there are, we talked about who's responsible. What are some of the things that are happening? Well, one, generational success is outrageously difficult to accomplish. It is incredibly hard to have generational success over multiple generations. Pokemon is probably Pokemon is the biggest IP that has had generational success. My kid, I was a fan of Pokemon. My sons and daughters are fans of Pokemon, and I'm very eager to get my grandchildren, and I think they're going to like Pokemon, right? But the reality is, it's incredibly rare to see generational success. So the fact that Star Wars is petering out, and this generation, and I'll tell you right now, kids do not give two rat's tails for Star Wars. They do not care. They do not care. My kids do not care about Star Wars. They don't, right? And it's just a fact, right? So there's that, right? So that's one of the issues. Is one of the things that happens is just generational success is amazingly difficult to do, right? Amazingly difficult. All right, so let's keep moving here. All right, so you got that issue, right? And so we talked about, what happened. That's one of the things that happened. And what could have been done differently? Well, there's a few things. So one, Solo seems like an obvious huge mistake. One, why on earth would you make a prequel movie about a character that just died on screen? Doesn't make any sense, right? They're dead. Like, why not make a Poe Dameron, prequel story, or the character Han Solo just died on screen, 2 movies back. It's fresh in everybody's mind. It made no sense to make Solo. Solo made no sense from a narrative perspective, right? The Galaxy's Edge. I think the biggest problem there is Galaxy's Edge. That city that is Galaxy's Edge. Why wouldn't you just make it Tatooine? Why wouldn't you make it Mos Eisley? It makes sense, right? Instead, they made it Batuu, right? Now, I think they might have been trying to save some money and not pay the original designers for Mos Eisley, whatever it was. But it was incredibly foolish to make it Batuu, right? Because nobody cares about Batuu. Nobody knows what Batuu is, right? Like, so it's a definite issue, definite problem. I don't know why they did it. It made absolutely no sense, right? So those are 2 huge problems. We did also talk about it before, this issue of putting your social goals in front of your narrative. People got to learn, hey, you got social goals, we all want to move the society forward, we get it, right? You could put that stuff in, but it needs to be the spice on the entree, okay? And what people have been doing is they've been taking the social goals and making that the entree and putting narrative on top of it as a spice, right? You don't put a pile of pepper down and then put a few flecks of meat, right? You put the meat down and then you put a little bit of pepper on the top, and that's the problem. I think that's the number one problem that we're having with Star Wars, is these social goals are coming way before the narrative. Major problem. Okay, all right. So you have this situation. And what could have been done, and so those are 2 very, very large missteps. Now, the reality is, again, I think the biggest thing by far is it's not that everybody failed or that Disney failed tremendously. It's incredibly difficult to have generational success, and so we need to acknowledge that, right? Part of this is you're trying to do this epic feat, and when you fail at an epic feat, nobody can laugh at you, right? Nobody can say, oh, you should have done X, Y, Z. You're trying to do this incredibly difficult thing, right? Really, only Pokemon has done it. All right, now, what can we do to fix this situation, right? I think there is something to do. There are some properties where when you look at them, now Pokemon is not going to fix our problems. One of the reasons why Pokemon is so successful, it's imaginary animals. Come on, like, everybody loves animals, and imaginary animals, people love them even more than regular animals, right? So and Pokemon has limits to its story, right? It appeals to adults, but the reality is it's primarily an adolescent or even a juvenile storyline, right? So there's limits to it, right? Whereas Star Wars is much more ambitious, right? So I think that's one of the things we can think about is we really are not going to get our answers from Pokemon. Now, there are some properties that I think we can get some answers from. One of the biggest ones is Voltron Legendary Defender. I'm a huge fan of that show. I think it's fantastic. It is truly transformative. It's a wonderful narrative. Really, really special show. They've done incredible things with that show. 9 seasons of that show, and every single one was better than the last, except maybe 8 and 9 were not the best seasons. But overall, that is a fantastic series. I absolutely love it. It's one of the best things that ever came on Netflix. And I think Star Wars could study it and just say, what did these people do to resurrect this old property, and now everybody loves it again, right? So that's a big one, right? And so I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned right there with Voltron Legendary Defender. The other thing that we can do is study farmers. All right, so I want to talk about fallow fields, right? So farmers have this thing they do with fields called fallowing. They fallow a field, right? So let's say you have a field and you grow corn in that field, right? So season after season after season after season, you grow corn in this field, right? Well, after like 6 seasons, you leave that field fallow. You plow it and you harrow it, but you leave it unsown. And the reason you leave it unsown, you don't put seeds in the ground, right? You don't sow the seeds. You don't let anything blossom for an entire season. You let it sit, and nothing grows there, right? And the reason you do this is to restore the fertility. Leaving something fallow restores fertility. All right, we got Star Wars 9 coming up. I will be there opening night. My butt will be in the seat. I will have my popcorn, right? You know, I'm super hype, very, very excited. I'm super excited for Star Wars 9. When Star Wars 9 finishes, so I already know that The Mandalorian's coming, but in my opinion, when Star Wars 9 finishes, they should shut Star Wars down for 5 years minimum. And I mean make nothing, right? And the reason why is I don't think we should bring Star Wars back until people are begging for it. I really feel like this. Like, I really feel that people take Star Wars for granted, and we need to pull it off. We need to pull it off the shelves for a while and let people miss it, right? Familiarity breeds contempt, right? And the reality is we need to let Star Wars be fallow for a while. All that is my opinion. What do you think? Who do you think is responsible for what happened? What could have been done differently? And how do we fix it now? I'd love to hear your opinions. Please let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.